Tonight on True Crime Canada, a deadly blurring of fantasy and reality.
I think he would just find something like in a movie, and then he wanted to emulate that himself.
One man seeking love online.
The way she wrote, she was very intelligent, and that's the kind of women I like.
Finds a date with death.
The hockey mask is what scared me the most. Right when you see that, it's obviously no date.
We'll take you inside this unparalleled case. Meet the detectives.
I go, holy crap, he killed the guy.
See the interrogation.
Mark, you remember what I mentioned to you earlier?
And meet the man police say was a movie-making murderer. This is True Crime Canada. Hi, I'm Ian Hannah-Mansing. It fills the pages of mystery thrillers and the scripts of so many Hollywood hits. Murder, husbands and wives, random strangers. For most in the audience, it's an entertaining diversion, but for a disturbing few, it motivates a dark desire to live out that plot. Tonight on True Crime Canada, we find out how easy it is for a man with murder on his mind to fulfill his fantasy, starting with finding a victim. Turns out Mark Twitchell had plenty to choose from online. All he had to do was change his name and pretend he was an alluring and available woman. The victims came running to him. That's where our colleague Bob McEwen of the CBC's Fifth Estate picks up the story, on the web and in Edmonton, Alberta.
It was the fall of 2008, and in Edmonton, Alberta, a young man named Mark Twitchell had a Friday night ritual, a drive to the city's south side. There, in a rented garage, he would act out his passion for science fiction, costumes, and movies, a vivid fantasy life that began with a fascination for the internet. He also went online looking for personal relationships, frequenting dating sites and chat rooms. In the year 2000, it's how he met Megan Castorella, who then lived in Colorado.
He had made up a dating resume with pictures and references. There was pictures of him in his Darth Maul costume in there, and then just like a headshot that he did of himself.
What was the point at which you started thinking, this could be somebody I'd like to have a long-term relationship with?
I think it was just how well we hit it off. He's a very charming guy, just really sweet, smart. He called himself the Renaissance Man.
Several months after they began communicating online, Megan flew to Edmonton, where they were married. She was 20, he 21. Megan would have much to learn about her new husband and his passions, the costumes, the fantasies, and the ultimate dream, to make his own movies.
I think he would just like find something like in a movie or character, and he would just kind of get lost in it, and then he wanted to emulate that himself.
Though Mark could be fun-loving, she soon saw another side to him. When she discovered he'd been unfaithful several times, she realized that Twitchell was a compulsive liar, and the marriage began to crumble.
So the lies were about infidelity. What else?
Gosh, they could be small. Did you pay this bill? Yeah, I paid it. And then debt collectors would call, and then I'd have to take care of it.
Megan was also aware of all the time Twitchell spent on the internet, creating bogus, often bizarre identities that he would act out in chat rooms or on dating websites, later emulating the TV serial killer Dexter.
It was just like a different person, like a darker side of Mark. I think he got a kick out of just messing with people. I think he did.
But what haunts her most now is something Mark Twitchell said shortly after they were married.
I don't even remember what we were talking about, like before, how this even came up, but he just asked me if I ever thought about killing someone.
She says she was taken aback, then answered honestly.
Well, I said, sure. I mean, everybody sometimes gets angry enough. They have those thoughts, but you don't act on them because it's not the right thing to do. And then he's proceeded to say that, well, I have. And I've thought about finding a homeless person. And so people wouldn't be able to really know who they were or connect us. So,
in that instant, when you heard that, what went through your mind?
well, it was just kind of a shock, like one of those slow motion kind of moments. And, you know, the realization that here I am thousands of miles from home, and I didn't really know him. I didn't really know him. This guy could be a psycho.
Psychotic or not, less than a year after Megan ended their marriage in 2005, Twitchell was married again to another woman he had met online. Before long, they had a child, but Twitchell's pattern of deceit continued. When he bought his young family a new home, he used fraudulent documents to get the mortgage. And his Friday night drives disguised the fact that he'd quit his job to devote himself to producing a movie. He was living on investors' money when he made this dark thriller about murder. Shot in late September 2008, a man is lured to an isolated garage by a woman he meets online. In this footage, the killer turns out to be a screenwriter working on a script about murder, who does his research by killing for real in a hockey mask. The plot written and directed by Mark Twitchell. The very next Friday, October the 3rd, a man named Gilles Tetreault found himself in the same Edmonton neighborhood, on his way to meet a date. Recently arrived from BC and recently separated, the 33-year-old high-tech contractor had gone online to bolster his social life. On a dating website, plentyoffish.com, he had chatted with an attractive young woman named Sheena, who seemed anxious. They meet.
She was about 5'6" in height, and she was very attractive looking, maybe like blue eyes kind of thing.
She also seemed smart and articulate.
The way she wrote, it made me feel like she was very intelligent, and that's the kind of women I like.
So when Sheena emailed a suggestion for dinner and a movie, Tetreault happily agreed.
It was almost like she was in complete control. She's the one that told me what we were gonna do, where we were gonna go. You know, you come pick me up. Let's go to do this. You know what I mean? It's like, and it was fine with me. It didn't matter.
That Friday, October 3rd, 2008, he drove to pick her up with directions to Edmonton's south side, then down a residential alley to what Sheena said was her garage.
I thought, you know what, let's take a leap of faith and try meeting this girl.
It was a few minutes past 7 p.m. when Gilles Tetreault arrived.
I drove up, I parked right in front of the open door that was open for me, the garage door.
He then went through the garage to meet Sheena, or so he thought. Inside, it was too dark to see when suddenly someone was attacking him with a stun gun.
He's prodding me with this thing, and it's turning blue. And then I see this man, he's towering over me, and wearing this hockey mask. The hockey mask is what scared me the most, because obviously right when you see that, it is obviously no date. We're just both standing there looking at each other, and that's when he pulls out this gun. I didn't know what he would do. I thought I was gonna die because of the gun. I didn't know if he's gonna kill me or not. And all I could think about was that I never told anybody where I'd be. If I died right then and there, no one would know what happened to me.
And he didn't know what was happening because he was pushed to the ground, his eyes covered with duct tape.
I'm terrified. Now, you know, not only does he have a gun, but I can't see what's going on, and I think, you know, I don't know what he has planned for me. But if I'm gonna die, I wanna die my way, not his way.
so Tetro ripped the tape from his eyes and leapt back to his feet.
Bullet hits me, it hits me, but my plan in my head, if he pulled the gun out, was that I try to grab it and push it away so it wouldn't hit me.
But as his hand closed around the gun, there was a moment of recognition.
It was the greatest feeling I ever felt because the gun was plastic.
The toy gun useless, the attacker kept punching Tetro as he struggled back towards the garage door.
So he kept hitting me, and every time he hit me, I just moved closer to the door.
Then, wrenching himself away from the masked man, he dropped to the floor and began to roll.
Just slipped right out, rolled under the garage door, and I was outside.
But now, for the first time, he felt the paralyzing effects of the stun gun.
And my legs wouldn't work. Now I'm crawling down this unpaved gravel driveway, and he comes out after me, and he grabs my legs, and he starts pulling me back to the garage.
How did things get so bad so fast? In a matter of minutes, looking for love has become a fight to the finish.
If I get back into that garage, I'm pretty much dead.
And as amazing as this part of the story is, it's only the beginning. Remember, our man in the hockey mask wants to become a serial killer. Lured online by the promise of love and sexual attraction, Gilles Tetro now lay weakened and dazed after repeated shocks from a stun gun. His attacker is not the pretty young woman he was expecting, but Mark Twitchell, a liar, a thief, a petty criminal who is trying to up his game to murder. Here again is Bob McEwen.
I got every ounce of whatever was left in me, or whatever power I had, and made my legs work.
At that moment, Tetro looked up and saw a man and a woman out for a walk. We took Marissa Gerhini and Trevor Hossinger back to where it happened that evening.
He looked at us and said, "This guy's trying to rob me, can you help me?" And I was already stunned, I was like, I think I just kind of panicked and just stopped and just didn't know what to do.
Did you have a sense, Trevor, of what kind of help he wanted at that point?
Well, yeah, because there was a black truck parked in the driveway, and he actually said, the second time after he said I'm being robbed, he's like, "Can you at least help me to my truck?"
But in the chaos of the moment, they feared it could all be an elaborate plan to attack or rob them.
Well, I was getting mad at Trevor because he kept stopping and he kept trying to go towards him, and I was thinking, oh my God, if they take over Trevor, what can I do? I can't do anything, and I couldn't scream, when you're dreaming and you can't scream. It was very scary.
In the end, they fled home and phoned 911. Trevor took the police to the alley and described what they'd seen, but says they didn't hear back. And they didn't know the identity of the man who'd begged for their help, then disappeared. It was the very next Friday night, October 10th, and another single man was following directions to the south side of Edmonton, to the very same garage on that residential alley. He too had a date with a woman he had met online. His name was John Altinger. A tall 38-year-old who worked in quality control, he was passionate about motorcycles and also drove a red hatchback, a Mazda. Gary Altinger is John's older brother.
When you saw John, you would look at his eyes and you would be comfortable with him very, very quickly. You could tell that he was an honest person. He had a great sense of humor. He was always good for a joke.
And John Altinger spent a lot of time online, emailing, and on dating websites. That Friday, he was hurrying to meet a woman named Jen that he too had met on the site called plentyoffish.com.
This was nothing new. And, you know, my brother was looking for love, and he thought he had found it.
John Altinger was never offline for long, always in touch with friends, a habit that would prove invaluable, though too late for him. As he set off in the red hatchback to meet his date, he emailed a running commentary to a friend, even sharing the directions Jen had given him. Just after 7 p.m., he reported that she had arrived. After that message, the man who was never out of touch went silent. His cell phone shut down. Two days later, Thanksgiving 2008. John Altinger had been uncharacteristically out of contact since going to meet his online date on Friday night. When he missed a much-anticipated bike trip, everyone was worried, according to his brother Gary.
When he didn't show up, when there was no phone call or anything else, they started getting worried, because if John told you that he was going to be at a place at a certain time, he would be there at a certain time.
Then on that holiday Monday, they all received a surprising message.
I received this email, and this email was completely out of character. I'm going away with her to Costa Rica, to her summer home in Costa Rica. I'll call you at Christmas time. I just thought right away, after I had read this, that's got to be the weirdest message I've ever received.
And Altinger's friends felt the same way, so they began to look deeper.
They phoned around. They phoned all of John's circle of friends. They phoned his work, and that's when they really started getting worried, when he didn't show up at work.
At that point, they were worried enough to call the police, but frustrated by the official attitude of wait and see. So his friends took matters into their own hands, breaking into Altinger's apartment. They found his clothes, his suitcase, even his passport. No sign he had taken that nice long vacation mentioned in the email.
And with that information, then they went to the police and they said, hey, listen, you've got to do something.
This time, the police took them seriously. Detective Bill Clark was assigned to the case. He usually deals with murder, not missing persons.
Normally, homicide detectives aren't called into these things. And my first question is, of course, is there a dead body? Why are we going?
Over more than 30 years with the Edmonton Police Service, Detective Clark has seen some strange things. But this just didn't ring true.
Your gut, your homicide detective's gut, is telling you something's wrong here.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt. I believe something's happened to John. It doesn't make sense. The guy's gone for 9 days now. No one's heard from him. Plus, you know, we knew that the friends had sent emails back saying, well, call me, and he never called.
In what would become the most intriguing case of his career, Detective Clark already had a key piece of information. Directions to the Southside garage, where Altinger was to meet his online date, which he'd emailed to a friend. It's where the homicide investigation would start. It was October 18th. John Altinger had been missing for over a week. For detectives, the first step was to contact the person renting that garage. It would turn out to be an aspiring filmmaker named Mark Twitchell, who told police he'd been shooting a movie there. But any suspicions they had about him soon diminished when he seemed all too happy to show them around the garage, answer their questions, and even raise some of his own.
So, okay, let me get this straight. Yeah. The guy who's missing, shows up to my garage.
Right.
Twitchell professed to be confused by that, and by something else. He said someone had tampered with the lock on the garage door.
Now, you arrived at the garage and you noted something immediately on your arrival when you went up to to the door to show the police the garage.
Yeah.
And what was that?
The first thing that I noticed upon looking a little closer at it, because the light wasn't that great, but I could see what was going on, the padlock didn't look familiar to me.
But to be sure about Mark Twitchell, Detective Bill Clark, known as a skillful interrogator, carefully reviewed the videotape of the Twitchell interview.
And the reason I wanted to watch it was to see his mannerisms, to see what my impression was of him in regards to how he reacted to the questions, how he answered them, whether or not he was deceptive. That's what I'm looking for, if he's a liar or not.
Yeah. And what did you see?
I thought Mark was upfront and honest.
So Twitchell passed Detective Clark's test with flying colors. He was off their radar, at least for now. And with John Altinger now missing for almost 2 weeks and increasingly presumed dead, police turned to the public looking for clues. Remember Marissa Gerhini and Trevor Hossinger, who'd witnessed that strange incident behind the garage? Finally called in for questioning. They assumed it was John Altinger who'd pleaded for their help.
We went into the interrogation room and they asked us everything, and I started to freak out. Like, I'm sitting here going that the victim is dead. I left the guy to die. Like, it's just overwhelming.
But when the homicide squad pieced together that story, they realized the incident the couple had stumbled upon had happened in the exact same place, and apparently an identical way. But it was a week earlier than the disappearance of John Altinger, so the man who'd begged for their help must be another victim. That changed the focus of the investigation and brought some comfort to Marissa and Trevor.
It was a big relief, but the victim still hadn't come forward yet, and that week or two that went by, well, worst week of my life.
The police had Mark Twitchell in their grasp in the interview room itself.
So I got 10 minutes to prepare for this interview, and I'm going, geez, we know nothing. What do we got?
What would make them realize that Twitchell was much more than he seemed?
If I don't get this guy to basically confess to something, I know he's walking out of here at any time.
Follow the clues along with investigators when True Crime Canada continues. As a wannabe serial killer, Mark Twitchell was proving to be something of a careless planner. Remember, those 2 witnesses had seen him in action.
I see this man. He was towering over me and wearing this hockey mask.
And there were other clues he'd left behind. But would it be enough to turn him into the prime suspect? Once again, Bob McEwen.
It was late in October 2008, and in Edmonton, police were looking for 2 men. Both of them were clients of an online dating service. They knew that one was 38-year-old John Altinger, last heard from on the Friday of Thanksgiving weekend, October the 10th, on his way to a South Side garage to meet his internet date. But they had no hard evidence a crime had been committed, or even that he was dead. Now, police also knew there was another man seen at that same garage a week earlier, pleading for help from 2 passers-by. But with no idea who or where he was, they went public again. Still, detectives believed the 2 incidents were linked, that if they found that unidentified victim, it could lead them to John Altinger too. But if that other victim was alive, why hadn't he contacted them? Detective Mark Anstey headed the Edmonton Homicide Squad.
You know, when we're in our bullpen, we're thinking, well, why wouldn't he come forward? You know, number 1, he might be married, so he might not, you know, want that to be known. Number 2, he might be dead. So, or number 3, just, you know, scared.
It turned out neither married nor dead. But as the homicide unit was about to learn, still terrified by his close call with the man in the hockey mask and keeping it to himself.
I was always watching out for this guy because I escaped, so I thought I didn't know if he knew where I lived or if he followed me or whatnot. So there's always some fear that maybe, like, I went to a mall one time and I thought maybe he's in the mall with me and he's following me, and I don't know. You know, you always have that feeling that maybe he's going to attack me again.
It took a month for Gilles Tétrault to face the fear, go to the police, and tell them the story of how he was attacked. Now, Detective Bill Clark has taken over the key interviews. Here, he gets Tétrault to describe what happened inside the garage.
Just take your time.
All right.
We got as long as it takes.
For sure.
There's no rush here, so.
All right.
It was the most engrossing interview I've ever been involved in, as far as dealing with a non-accused person. I just sat on the edge of my chair listening to every word he was saying, and I'm like, holy mackerel. It was like I was reliving it with him.
But I'm this way now. Somehow we all shifted. And so then that's when he's, I tried kicking him in the balls.
As the interview progresses, Detective Clark realizes what Gilles Tétrault is telling him might well be the words of John Altinger, too, and the closest he may ever come to hearing that story.
Nice close to the door. Ran under the door, got outside, and
For Tétrault, it would end in escape. But exactly 1 week later, in the very same place, John Altinger would disappear. And as you'll see, the Edmonton Homicide Squad eventually would have reason to fear other similar incidents were planned or had already taken place. And detectives would speak again with the man renting that garage, filmmaker Mark Twitchell. Remember, investigators had already spoken to Twitchell once before, after learning John Altinger had disappeared while en route to his garage. In that interview, Twitchell insisted he hadn't seen Altinger or his red Mazda hatchback, and Detective Bill Clark thought he sounded upfront and honest. But later that same day, out of the blue, Twitchell suddenly volunteered something he claimed he'd forgotten, that he'd recently bought a new car, a red Mazda hatchback, the very same make and model John Altinger was driving the night he disappeared. When he heard that, homicide detective Bill Clark was incredulous. Twitchell was not only back on the radar, he was now at the top of their list. The coincidence of the red hatchback was simply too much to ignore. But Twitchell readily agreed to come to the police station for another interview, this time with Detective Clark. When they'd first spoken to him, he had seemed like a concerned citizen trying to help out. But now, even with the circumstantial evidence of the car, Clark knows he has little more than his instinct to go on.
So I got 10 minutes to prepare for this interview, and I'm going, geez, we know nothing. What do we got? And I'm scrambling, like, give me anything. I says, if I don't get this guy to basically confess to something, I know he's walking out of here at any time.
What follows is a remarkable glimpse of a veteran police investigator at work. Clark begins by asking about the hatchback that Twitchell said he had bought from someone on the street.
And he asked me, you know, hey buddy, do you want to buy a car? And I said, well, you know, I'm in a car. Like, what do you mean? And he goes, well, I have shacked up with this really rich lady. You know, it's like a sugar mama kind of situation, and she's gonna take care of me, and she's gonna buy me a new car when we get back from a vacation that we're gonna take.
Well, what's going on? Do you know, or?
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna find out right now.
Clark leaves the room, excited. Twitchell's story about the car is so implausible, he feels the case is about to break wide open.
I go, holy crap, he killed the guy.
His instinct is telling him, it's now or never.
I says, if I don't get a confession, this guy's walking out of here tonight. And we all realize that, you know, and then we're now talking, we're 3, 4 in the morning. And we talk about our next strategy. I says, well, I'm going to confront him.
Yeah.
We're going to start the hard part of the interview now. Change the tone of the interview. I'm now going to take charge.
Because for these hours, you've been the good cop. You've been his friend. Cop. You've been offering an ear to listen to him.
Not the best role for me. I like to be the bad cop.
The clues, the text messages, the storage locker, the car, all led detectives to one inescapable conclusion. Mark Twitchell was their man. But speaking of escape, without the confession, Twitchell might just get away with it all.
I says, holy mackerel, he's detailing the whole crime.
What could they do to crack the case? That's next on True Crime Canada. For police, there was the sense of accomplishment in snaring their prime suspect, and an agonizing fear. If they didn't do their detective work right, in the next few minutes, a murderer could walk right out of the interview room. Here again is Bob McEwen.
Mark, you remember what I mentioned to you earlier about contacting a lawyer? That still holds true, okay, just so you're aware. Okay. If at any time we're talking you want to contact a lawyer, you can do so at any time. I'll take you to a phone.
I decide I'm not going to say he killed the guy because I don't know that John's dead. And if I say the wrong thing, he's going to know I don't, right? So I'm careful in my wording.
Think of Bill Clark as a poker player, setting up a bluff.
There's something else I want to tell you, Mark, and that's that there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that you're involved in the disappearance of John Altinger. No doubt in my mind at all, Mark.
Why?
And I'm thinking, what kind of response is that? So now I know. I know this guy's involved up to his neck. I don't know what he's done, but I know he's involved.
Remember, Twitchell's already acknowledged possession of Altinger's red hatchback, which he claims he bought on the street. But with no body or any other evidence of a crime, Detective Clark has little choice but to let Twitchell go. As he's about to leave, they have this telling exchange.
You're not going to be able to live with yourself with this for the rest of your life. You'd be surprised what I can live with.
So the homicide squad went to work, convinced that at the very least Mark Twitchell knew what had happened to John Altinger. But until they laid a charge, they couldn't arrest and detain Twitchell. However, they could get the legal authority to conduct a search. And in the hours ahead, they would comb through his car and his house, seizing an eclectic assortment of movie props and personal effects. But for all their investigative efforts, the crucial clues and evidence would come from an unwitting source, the suspect himself. It was on October 22nd, 2 days after Detective Clark confronted Mark Twitchell, that police examining his computer files would make an astonishing discovery. Hours of their high-tech search had come up empty. Then, in his laptop trash bin, in a document that Twitchell had deleted, a file appeared. It was entitled SK Confessions, and it was soon clear what SK meant.
This is the story of my progression into becoming a serial killer. Like anyone just starting out in a new skill, I had a bit of trial and error. Allow me to start at the beginning, and I think you'll see what I mean.
They rushed the news to Detective Bill Clark.
They came down to the office and said, "You are not going to believe what we found." I remember sitting at my desk and they handed me a copy, and I started reading the first page. I says, "Holy mackerel, he's detailing the whole crime."
When the homicide team cross-checked Twitchell's document against the facts they already knew to be true, like the attack on Gilles Tetreault, SK Confessions proved a remarkably accurate record of Twitchell's crimes.
And when I pointed the gun at him again, he grabbed it.
You know, I read about me and it's like he remembers things that I forgot.
Tetreault says the description in SK Confessions of his struggle with Twitchell on October 3rd is letter perfect.
Just my story alone, everything that he says in that part of it is exactly true.
And then there is the gruesome step-by-step account of the murder on October the 10th, the dismemberment and disposal of the man Twitchell calls Jim, whose story appears to be exactly that of John Altinger.
I sang to myself as I worked, talked to myself, reflected on the new tools I would get to make the next one easier.
After Gilles Tetreault's narrow escape, reading about Altinger's horrific experience was overwhelming.
When I got to the part where what he did to Johnny, I started tearing up because it was so brutal. And then you think about, wow, look what he did to this guy, and then he could have did that to me. And then so it's really emotional when I read that.
EPS homicide detectives have arrested and charged a suspect in connection with the disappearance of John.
Mark Twitchell spent Halloween 2008, his favorite holiday, in the back seat of an Edmonton police cruiser, finally under arrest.
Charged with first-degree murder is 29-year-old Mark Andrew Twitchell. Twitchell was arrested.
Police considered the details found in his computer memoir to be Twitchell's confession, but a key piece of the case against him was still missing.
The evidence was damning. He was done. But we didn't have John.
When Twitchell was arrested, John Altinger hadn't been seen for 3 weeks. He was presumed dead. But where was his body? In the hope of convincing Twitchell to give up Altinger's remains, Bill Clark and other members of the homicide team took him for a drive around Edmonton, a trip which, as you can see in this exclusive footage, they recorded.
You know you're done. Our investigation is impeccable. Our evidence is flawless. The only piece of the puzzle that's missing is returning Johnny Altinger to his family. The decent thing to do.
But despite it all, he refused to cooperate.
Where do you want us to head to, Mark?
Station.
The station? Body's not at the station, Mark. So where should we head? You point out the body to us.
Later, with Twitchell in jail awaiting trial, Clark tried a surprise visit.
Hey, Mark, what's up? All right, Mark, you could be kidding me, right? No, it's not at all.
Hoping to convince him to do the right thing by John Altinger's family and reveal where he had disposed of the body. Again, no luck.
Where are you guys going? I'm coming back, so not trying to give you a hard time. I want the answer.
But 9 months later, it was Mark Twitchell's turn to spring a surprise. Now, he wanted the meeting.
When I got told of that, I remember thinking, holy mackerel, he's given us the body. He's given us John.
But the offer came with conditions, among them, no Bill Clark. So 2 other detectives went to the remand center.
You are being detained for first-degree murder and attempted murder, so there are a few things that I'm going to read to you here.
The meeting with Twitchell lasted barely 3 minutes. Police read him his rights.
Whatever you say may be given in evidence. Do you understand what I just read to you there? Yes. Very good.
Then he had something to give to them.
We'll just give you a piece of paper. That's fine. I'm just going to make a note of the time. It's 18:20 hours. And we'll be on our way then. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
He'd given them a map on which there was some handwriting.
They walk out, and it was a Google map, and he had marked the location of the body in a sewer on that map.
In March 2011, Mark Twitchell went to trial in Edmonton for first-degree murder. Taking the stand on his own behalf, Twitchell insisted he lured Altinger and Tetro to the garage to build publicity for his movie, assuming that when he let them go, they'd spread the news about what had happened through word of mouth. It all went wrong, Twitchell testified, when an infuriated John Altinger attacked him, and he had no choice but to defend himself. His writing about the murder, he insisted, wasn't a confession, but pure fiction. The jury didn't buy it, returning their verdict in just 4 hours. On April the 12th, Mark Twitchell was convicted and sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years. Twitchell is now incarcerated at the maximum security penitentiary in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, where he's denied requests for on-camera interviews. But both before and after the guilty verdict, he's chosen to communicate extensively with the Fifth Estate, by letter. What he has to say is revealing, justifying his every instinct, motive, and action, deconstructing what he calls his wrongful conviction.
Now that the trial is over, gloves are off. It's time to come out of the rabbit hole. This is my story.
He insists the guilty verdict was due to mistakes made by others. Police, judge, jury, his own lawyer, all intellectually unable to understand him. And the man who obliterated the line between fiction and reality can't resist rewriting his story to make himself the victim.
The fact is that normal, healthy, well-adjusted 30-year-old men with zero history of abuse, mental problems, or violence of any kind don't just roll out of bed one morning and run around throwing their lives away, killing people they don't know and have no beef with.
But for those caught up not in the fiction, but the fact of Twitchell's murder story, they're the real-life what-ifs.
He never thought about the details. Yet he's so detailed in planning and how he killed him, but after that he never thought about the details. I mean, who?
For the police, it's could they have caught the killer without the help of the victim?
He never anticipated that Johnny Altinger would tell his friends so much as to what he was going to do that night. That he could confide in his friends to that degree, because he never anticipated that. And if Johnny Altinger hadn't, who knows, he might have got away with it.
For Marissa Gerhini and Trevor Hossinger, it's what more could they do?
And do you also take it a step farther and say, if we had done something else, maybe what happened to John Altinger might not have happened?
For me, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And I was like, we could have stopped this in his tracks, day one, and everyone
would never have happened.
Exactly. Everyone would still be alive, and everyone would still be happy.
And then there's Gilles Tetreault, who says though he still has fear and remorse, it's now tempered with relief since the day he met John Altinger's mother.
And she put a smile on her face. She grabbed my hand and said, "Oh, I'm so happy you're still here with us." And to me, that meant so much to me. I thanked her for it.
Technology helped Mark Twitchell conceal his identity and hunt for the victims that would help him live out his bizarre fantasy. But the same technology also gave the police the evidence they needed for a conviction. And let's not forget the key roadmap that John Altinger sent in the last moment of his life. Next time on True Crime Canada, they were young and beautiful, but when cultures clashed, it ended in murder. We take you inside the investigation of a crime that shocked the nation.
She was afraid that he would kill her.
Find out what happens when a father, a brother, and a mother decide they have the ultimate power in their family over who lives and who dies.
She said if ever her father or her brother finds out, she would get killed.
I'm Ian Hanemansing. Thanks for watching.